Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Barbara Scafidio, and I'm the moderator of this webinar featuring Katie Muck of Meeting Sites Resource. Many thanks to our sponsors today, Kalahari Resorts and Conventions, Kiowa Island Golf Resort, and Palace Resorts Meetings and Incentives. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. During the presentation, feel free to enter your questions in the question box. I'll be gathering them together to hold a Q&A at the end of the presentation. And don't worry if you missed something, this webinar is being recorded and you'll receive a link via email to access the recording at your leisure. I do encourage you to stay on for the entire webinar, and one lucky winner will be selected in a drawing for a $100 gift card. I will announce the winner right at the end. Finally, as an attendee today, as with all Prevue webinars, you are eligible for 1 credit hour toward your CMP from the Events Industry Council. That's it for me for now, so sit back and get comfortable, and Katie, take it away.
Barbara, thank you for that wonderful introduction to the information we'll be sharing today. Industry friends, I just wanted to pop in and say hi. You can see there's a real person here, the face with the name. I am going to turn off my cam so that we can focus on the information and get started right away. All right, so today we're going to be talking about successful negotiations in the seller's market. Now, I'm going to be hopping on by saying that we know things have changed here in the last 30 days. We all know what's currently happening in the marketplace, well, and all over the world for that matter. The information I'm going to share with you is relevant in any economic condition. So the information is helpful for both suppliers and planners, and just want to make you aware of that we all are aware, but we're going to focus on the positive right now and just some strategies that we can work on together in successful negotiations. The first few slides I am going to share are about 2020 industry trends. Now, this information is relevant. It's relevant because our economy was strong before and it will come back. But this is where everything was set before the pandemic hit last month officially and shutting things down in March. This is just a quick snapshot, and I want to share this again because at this point there is no updated data post-pandemic. It's too early to tell, and we just want to get a snapshot of everything of where we were at prior to all of the changes in the marketplace. The first slide we'll talk about is the supply and demand of how everything was looking at the beginning of 2020. Basically, when you look at growth, it's happening in the limited service, primarily in that product in most marketplaces. Demand is increasing. The demand we are looking at increasing is those medium to large size properties. So really this basic supply and demand is not meeting. Where you're seeing hotel occupancy going down is because there's a slight decline due to availability in those markets and availability in those larger hotels. Again, the average daily rate of hotels is increasing slightly. It's down from those previous 9 years. Again, some hoteliers are saying that's because of availability. Others are saying because of multiple year deals in process in previous years. And lastly, to address the airfares are slightly climbing as we're seeing worldwide. When it comes to meeting specific trends, cost per attendee, it was jumping about 8% as we're seeing from previous years. Again, we're seeing this in specific items such as added on fees and surcharges. Those are continuing to increase, but we are also seeing new categories of fees and surcharges. I am going to address this later in the presentation and the importance of acknowledging that and asking about these early in the process. But no, this is part of the cost of attendee and where that we're seeing that jump. As far as leads go or meetings go, the lead time is down to an average of about 59 days and about 3 days in duration and about 73 attendees on average group size. Now that could be due to a number of reasons, but what we're seeing and what we're hearing is that companies and associations budgets have been decreased, trying to still enhance that experience by the attendee. So that may have been a change in overall seeing regional meetings, seeing multiple meetings maybe in some of their locations like second tier cities where prices may have been a little bit lower, but just there's a plethora of reasons. But overall snapshot, this is a cost per attendee and where things at we're on a meeting by meeting basis in early 2020 trends. Industry trends, again, overall, they are still saying that we are looking at trade wars are still being very much a concern. It's that geopolitical concern and security risk, and hotels and attendees, feeling that pressure to make sure that everybody is in a safe situation when they're at a meeting. One slight change would be, October 1st was that live date for everyone having what we're calling a real ID, that gold star in the right corner. There was some slight concern that, that may hinder attendees, or that may affect attendance for those people who had not really heed all the warnings that you had received to get that specific ID in place. Something, again, not really overall impacting, but something just to be addressed because that was a change coming in 2020. We're constantly seeing the issue of pleasing and attendees and overall attendee experience, but still having that done in a shorter length of time and spending that percentage of budget in different areas. So again, that leads into non-traditional spaces are in more high demand because that's looked at as creating a memorable experience. And then overall percentage average on budget is spent on food and beverages about 42%. Again, these are just trends that we want to just review with everybody on the call so we can get a snapshot of where we were in the beginning of the year, and that we can move on and talk a little bit more about the challenges and the tips that you can create in a market in this scenario. So let's start with the meeting planners. Meeting planners, when we've surveyed and reached out to you in the recent history, these are the things we're consistently seeing from several meeting planners. They're feeling an increased hotel cost and meeting support costs. So overall, on the cost of hosting a meeting, you're seeing that everything has increased. You're seeing that hotel contract terms and added hotel fees and surcharges are part of that conversation. Planners, feel free to kind of jot down at this point in time. We'll talk about Q&A at the end, as Barbara mentioned, but maybe jot down a few things and a few ideas, some challenges that you may be experiencing right now that would be a good talking point that we could share later in the webinar. Again, overall, increased expectations by your senior management and your stakeholders. That's an overall arching issue that we see as a trend. We didn't forget about you, our hotelier friends. You also have been surveyed, and we've been talking about the things that hoteliers have on their list of challenges when working with planner negotiations and contracting. This slide reviews the top 3 that we have seen overall in the consistent answer from hoteliers. Receiving incomplete RFPs that don't provide the data that they need to support your meeting when it comes to representing them to their stakeholders at the hotel. When planners understate the room block and the food and beverage revenue, then they can't really get a full snapshot of where you're coming from. They're seeing this as a challenge because, there's always an idea that if we understate a room block instead of inflate it, we may be in a better situation when it comes to negotiating attrition and so forth and those other clauses. But overall, just being clear and consistent on those room blocks really does make a difference. And then unrealistic expectations for meeting space and concessions. That's just, sometimes we see that as hoteliers, they have a specific matrix they need to follow. And sometimes what planners are asking for may not fall within that matrix of they're asking for at the hotel. Some trends that are with surveys on ROI. Recent survey data shows that about half of planners feel pressure to enhance their meeting results and how they're measuring their ROI, and about 3/4 of planners are tasked to actually demonstrate the cost savings. So overall, there's just a lot of pressure to, again, report that to our stakeholders in a manner that's measurable and can be understood. When senior management thinks that over, about 50% of those CEOs feel that they're not getting their maximum ROI from their meetings department, and just slightly less than that are just not satisfied with their spend, this is a big area and opportunity. Planners, I encourage you not to feel overwhelmed. There's a large number of planners who have felt the pressure to implement a strategic meeting management plan. And in doing so, they feel like they may be missing out on maximizing the results by focusing on the plan. I encourage you to just maybe look at a key data stake that takes place in small steps. Small steps when I mean focusing on what components work in your meeting environment. Is there a specific idea or is there a specific thought that you could talk to your senior management about? Maybe just getting the conversation going with them and taking one small piece and building upon that is really where that strategic meeting management plan grows from, and that it's not overwhelming to all involved. As we mentioned, when management finds or management perceives that there is a gap, that's a call to action and again, a huge opportunity for you. And when I say management and speaking with planners and hoteliers, this is all of your stakeholders. You know, it's when you look at this overall, what we're saying is that when you have the option or the opportunity to educate your stakeholders on both sides, planners and hoteliers, you address their concerns, you're solving their problems. This is a huge help to your company and individually to your career. The difference in what leadership may perceive and really helping them really understand what is taking place in the meetings arena and showing those metrics around it can be the game changer. The big picture goal is to implement, again, small pieces of that strategic meeting management standard and rolling that out so that all parties involved, especially your stakeholders, feel included and that their questions are being answered. So let's start talking about how in a seller's market you would negotiate contract terms and how hotels really value your meetings. Planners, I would encourage you to focus on the question of what data are you putting into your RFPs to get the hotel's attention. In reviewing the slide, these are the variables that the hotel looks at when reviewing your RFP or when the outside variables as well. So let's take a look at a few of these and just talk in further detail. Obviously, outside of the group arena is the transient demand, basic arrival and departure patterns, your rooms to space ratio of what you're presenting to the hotel of what your needs are. The group food and beverage revenue, that's pretty basic. That's all of the group food and beverage events that you're listing you're going to be holding at their hotel. Lead time can also be a positive or a negative. As we're seeing that shortened lead time window, it can mean that they have an opportunity to fill a hotel and maybe providing you a better rate, better cost savings, better concessions to fill their hotel with that short lead time. Also, that can also be a negative because sometimes as we're seeing, maybe checking 2 to 3 cities might be a reality because that lead time the window has really tightened up. And so you may be actually not getting your first choice, maybe your second or third choice. Seasonality, we know when dealing with different venues, different locations, seasonality is always something that is taken into account. When I mention history here, history is something where I'm talking about not just providing the hotelier with history of what you've paid in the past. As a matter of fact, I would recommend planners not to do that. When I talk about history, that's about the type of hotel you've been to, the context around it. So if you have been to 4 and 5 star hotels in the past, that's something that the hotelier has known, that the type of expectation of service level and the type of property you've been to in the past, not necessarily the exact rate you have paid in the past. Potential incremental revenue. Now, when we talk about this is potential ancillary spend around your meetings. And this is something that I think it's left out a lot and can bring a lot of value to the table. This is ancillary spend that maybe your attendees on their off time or at leisure, or that you know that they do spend at a hotel when you're attending a meeting. This can actually really add value when you have the data to bring that to the table and show that revenue to the hotel in the beginning stages of the RFP process. The total overall value of your account. Are you a piece of the bigger pie, if you would call it that? Is this a regional meeting to a bigger division that holds 2 or 3 larger annual meeting or a sales meeting, and that they're leveraging that total value of that account? And again, they look at the overall risk. Risks at the hotel, saying that the rooms being held and the availability or the ability to pick up. Look at the history again of where you've been in the past couple of years, and the hotels often will ask for your pickup in those locations. Where have you been able to mitigate those damages or to negotiate where we are with a percentage of cancellation or attrition in the contract? And then again, just addressing all other groups that are contracted over those same dates and what revenue contributions they are providing to the hotel. I know we touched on history, and I mentioned that was really important, planners, when I was talking about providing the type of hotel and not really providing the rate. What I mentioned there is that how often do you get a call possibly from a supplier once you send an RFP and they're asking, what are you willing to pay? What is the budget? What is the room rate you're looking for? Planners, this is where I would say to you, this is a where you would be backing into your budget. I would encourage you to talk to the suppliers in a matter that asking them, what's currently going on in your market, letting them be the subject matter expert. What are you seeing in your city? Putting that question back on them, really not providing them that dollar amount. Also, there is probably the same basic information or the same information over and over that you might provide to the hotels when you've been sending out your RFPs. I would challenge you to take this opportunity to maybe change things up. Is there something in the categories listed on this slide that you have not considered before adding into your RFP? I would challenge you in the next 30, 60 days, try something different, change things up, see if you get other results when sending things out. If you can add a little bit more information and value into the initial process, let's see what other responses you may be able to receive. There is one slight trend that I just wanted to bring up that may be happening as we see meetings progress later in the year. So as meetings come back on board for 2020, the only thing that I would heed and notice is that, that when we saw the market crash over 2008 and 2009, there were some meetings, corporate and association alike, that were able to afford different hotel properties that they may not have generally done so in the past. So we may see a little bit of scale off when we're talking again about the importance of history. So in 2020, when we see the bounce back come, for example, there may be hotels that open up their doors and drop rates and just to fill the hotel, for lack of better words, for the last part of the year. So this may be something just to keep a pulse on when you're looking at history and building that strategic meeting management data, and just to look at the fact that maybe this may be something similar that happened in 08 and 09, and just keep that data as an outlier, not the norm. So in discussing the industry profit margin, this is hotel information and about how the average hotel's industry profit margins lie. Again, we all know that the biggest profit margins are in the rooms and group food and beverage revenue. Planners, know that it is important to know the value and contribution of each of these categories so that your meeting gets the hotel's attention and they accept your RFP. We talked about this earlier in the previous slide about providing that extra data about recreation, spa, that retail, those blue and pink portions of the grid here on this slide, that adds up to about 30%. And knowing that information or being able to represent that information in the beginning process does make a difference to the hotel. I was in a recent situation with one of my customers who was able to, based upon the last year or two of history of an incentive that they had planned, offer that information up to the hotel. And for their preferred set of dates, they were actually the second option group. However, when they were able to provide this extra ancillary spend, it showed that their meeting was of higher value than their first option group, and they were able to leverage that when it came to representing your group to the hotel's leadership team and really push the bar and showed that, even though it wasn't in the rooms arena or it wasn't in the group food and beverage arena, they were actually going to be spending more on average at the hotel based upon history, giving the full picture of the industry profit margins. These are all components that revenue management needs to be provided when the hotelier goes to bat on your behalf. The salesperson can fully represent your group when they have this information. And so I encourage you to come up with ways that you can, if you haven't previously, start capturing this data now. Let's talk a little bit about how hotels are selected according to event technology. Now, we all use some form of event technology in order to send out our RFPs. There is a problem that has been created using technology and event technology, and that is that the clickability to just click on multiple hotels, multiple cities, and really just maybe overinflate what we're really looking for instead of evaluating specific and being more precise on the type of hotels that are being looked at. So the numbers can somewhat get inflated because of the fact that there has been this problem of what we call clicking in event technology by planners and not really qualifying. About 15 to 20 hotels are sourced per RFP on average. Of that, about 10% are not being responded to at all. And then the rest of the grouping kind of falls that some of them are basically, overall, if you're coming in at the lowest rate, they're just looking at something that with rates, dates and rates, 37% of the time, the lowest bid wins. However, the most important piece of this, I think, is that bottom bullet point that in looking at RFPs, 20% of the RFPs that are the first hotel to respond. When you're the first hotel, 20% of the time you win. If you're the second hotel to respond, another 20% chance that you win, and then third. So realistically, hoteliers, you have a 60% chance of winning the business if you are the first, second, or third person to respond to this. Now, another great example I can give in working with customers and hotels alike in this is that hoteliers often, and suppliers or hoteliers and planners, need to be able to answer the call and answer the phone after they've read through the entire qualified RFP and make sure that everybody is on the same page when responding. I recently had a hotelier call me and ask specific questions about the RFP. I chose this as a learning opportunity to reference them back to the information that was provided. As planners, there is a lot of time that is taken into gathering this information, and this is valuable. And using this time to talk to the supplier, I actually was able to talk more about what was important to the client, questions around the meeting, and what their real goals were around that. So again, that was a 5-minute conversation that I was able to give more information on the background of the meeting and not just the number questions, not just the transactional questions. Reference back that information. Don't feel bad about saying that was included in the initial RFP. Let me walk you through where that was provided and give the opportunity, having that person on the phone, to give a little bit more background on what your meeting's really about and give them the opportunity to speak to you. And maybe you don't know, maybe they're going to be the winning 60% chance of winning your business because they're going to be the first, second, or third to respond because they have the background to do so. And talking about how hoteliers are responding to your RFPs. Now, there is information that can be skewed based upon how the flow of business by brand, by chain is controlled, and that's in the ERFP arena. So about 10% of ERFPs are converted into contract, and 40% of those are turned down at a central RFP response office. So that's where we're saying some of that control flow is outside of the hotel. And again, this is different for every single brand, every single hotel. So there is not one that would be consistent here. So this is, a little bit variable information. This is why planners, it's so important to show the qualified ERFP at this point. ERFPs are rated generally, if you think about it, as an A, B, and C. A being, we have all the information we need, we can pass this along to the hotel, and obviously B and C being the latter based upon the information provided in the RFP. In the previous example, I talked about, communication and conversations really do matter. When you pick up that phone, asking big picture questions, asking context around the meeting, not the revenue management question or the yes or no question, really getting to know what the importance is of having that meeting and what their end goals are and what they really are, what are they trying to provide to the attendees and what are their biggest challenges that they've had in the past with this meeting and what successes have they had, and trigger that to, include that in your answer and ways to be able to really provide them with some detail. Details in the RFP matter, details in the response matter, and again, communication and conversations are key. So talking about some of the best practices for both planners and suppliers. It's really all about being a good business partner and talking strategically through goals, not talking through those yes or no questions or talking through the rate, talking through, all of those money-driven questions. It's really about the picture. I encourage both of you, be the subject matter expert. Planner, be that subject matter expert for the supplier, educating them on why your business is important, what your meeting's all about. Hoteliers, be the subject matter expert to the planners. about your hotel. What makes your hotel different? What's going on in your city over those dates? Why it would be great to host a meeting there? Or maybe in the reference that this might not be the best time to host a meeting there, and be that provider of saying, hey, maybe not weekend A, but weekend B, let me provide you with this information because this may be a better time for you to meet at our property. Again, referring back to communication overall, it matters. Suppliers, reading all of the details that you receive from the planner in that RFP process. I encourage you not to send out a general email, but actually, again, respond with some of those advisory questions, not those revenue management questions. Planners, including the detail the hotel really needs to bid, going back to providing the information that affects rooms revenue, incremental revenue, food and beverage revenue, all of that history information based upon context, not about the numbers. Through the process, providing them with status updates so they can have real-time updates where things are in the planning process or the decision-making process. And then understanding the value your meeting brings to the table and possible flexibility where that can be an opportunity for cost savings for you as well as the planner. Let's go back to talking about how planners must demonstrate strategic cost savings. And again, we're talking about directing this to their stakeholders. The planners we have surveyed, their top challenges, again, are coming up with some of those credible metrics and formulas to define those real cost savings and how they're going to communicate those total cost savings to senior management. Planners are making strategic decisions based upon the information the suppliers are providing. Information to build into their budgets, such as, what are the taxes at your hotel? What are the service charges? Give us your current menu pricing. Suppliers make sure that that is all up to date, as this is where they have to bring this information up to their stakeholders to make decisions. A lot of procurement departments are now involved in the decision-making process, and they generally look at choices and ask the questions of the planners. Why would we go to Hotel A, for example, if Hotel B is in the same market and is more cost effective, along the same quality and location, etc.? Give them the reasons and the backup in this data so they can really define this metric and make these understand why choosing choice A over choice B makes sense. I think it's safe to say from our conversation that cost savings initiatives are important overall to most organizations on both sides of the conversation. Sharing your hotel or sharing your value with the hotel is definitely something you need to provide in the beginning stages. Again, this helps us manage our stakeholders both on the hotelier side and understand the expectations on the planner side. In getting in more detail about cost savings, these are the metrics you want to measure for success. This is where you would start, again, implementing that strategic meeting management plan and taking pieces of that to start on a small scale. Again, sleeping room rates overall, this is a cost savings report and the information you want to include. The concessions you were able to gain through the negotiations process. Food and beverage, what are the overall comps? What are the overall discounts you've been able to provide? AV, internet, the hotel fees and surcharges. Preferred suppliers, are there additional discounts you've been able to negotiate because you're using preferred suppliers of the hotel or preferred suppliers in the area that you're meeting in? And then master account discounts. This is a lot what we see in larger meetings where you're getting actual percentages off your master account and overall bigger savings. I want to share a recent experience on the AV and production, going back to that piece of things. We've all seen that AV can be a big cost center and a big challenge when planning meetings and also when talking to hotels about the overall cost of the program. You could bring the same exact meeting, same exact number of breakouts, same exact attendees, same exact production, and in two different locations, just like other things, AV production can be a complete one range of cost to the other. I encourage you, planners, talk more about this with your suppliers. Ask them the questions. Sharing AV costs, possibly with another group, on maybe the front end of your meeting, on the back end of your meeting, is a huge cost savings and a big metrics you can measure in sharing that with your stakeholders. If there is a program that is tearing down and getting out of and leaving the meeting space when you are setting up, if you guys have the same setup or if maybe you have the same production, let's get the conversation going. Ask the hotelier, to be able to talk to the other planner. Maybe you guys can share costs, share those costs that the AV company is quoting, and then that way you can also have additional setup time because you only have to take down half of their items to bring in the other hours. Or again, on the hindsight, when you're checking out of the hotel, what other groups have contracted on the hindsight? What other shared costs can you provide those other groups? In doing a cost savings analysis, you will want to do that at 2 points in the planning process. One, after the contract is countersigned, and two, you will want to update that planners after the meeting is actualized. I do recommend you presenting this document twice to your stakeholders and representing it in a partnership with your hotel supplier that you have contracted with. This is the value that the hotel has provided. I also encourage you planners to put the requested concessions that you're looking for in the RFP up front. That way the hotel can be an advisor through the meetings process and really answer the questions that are relevant to what you're looking for, not just guess maybe upon what things are important to you. I do have a customer that I work with that will always put this up front. They have several non-negotiable items that apply to their meetings, and then they use the additional questions to simplify and narrow down to their short list. Then in the next step, they add added value items and concessions that they're requesting. And based upon how those respond, they see this as one, hotel willing to be a good partner. Two, is the information they're providing valuable? And three, the communications process. If the hotel seems eager to work with them and really wanting to talk about what bringing their meeting to the hotel brings to the bottom line to the hotel and why they really want their business, they see this as a communications process being positive from the beginning and feel that once they're on site for their meeting too, this bodes well for the actual meeting. Here are the big picture goals in talking about hotel contract negotiations. To ensure maximum risk and maximum risk reduction and cost containment, I do recommend planners that you create a custom hotel contract manager. And this, you would address all those components, those value added concessions, the hotel fees, those surcharges, performance clauses, and company liability language. Again, this is all about contract integrity and making sure that we're a good partner to the hotels, including all of those components we talked about, the added meaning value, deriving that cost savings, and the risk reduction, cost containment. Keep in mind, plan if you are using a contract, a custom contract, when you present that to the hotel, several hotels use that contract and put that as an addendum to their contract, incorporate into one document. Please keep in mind that there are specific clauses that you know you want included in the contract, and make sure that that language that you've requested in your custom contract does not contradict the hotel performance language. Often hotels will attach, again, that addendum, and then to the contract, the performance clause that you've presented may conflict with what is in the actual contract document that the hotel that you have signed. This could create a big issue in the case of non-performance, and just making sure that everybody's on the same page and both your document in the addendum and the hotel's contract are saying the same thing before signature. We touched on it briefly earlier, but again, twofold. The cost savings report needs to be twofold, once after counter signature and second after actualization. It's really important to have those specific metrics, and the hotel is providing those so that the planner can provide definite measurable data and report those successes to their stakeholders. From your countersigned contract, what you'd report is the actual risk reduction and cost savings that from each meeting by meeting you can report. Then after the actualization, you add in actual value for those items. For example, for a meeting, if you were receiving 10% off AV or a 5% off your master bill, you at the beginning stage before actualization cannot define the actual dollar amount. Once you've checked out the hotel, received your final bill, you can go back and update this upon actualization so you can actually add in that physical dollar amount. These items are important to be calculated, again, for sharing to your stakeholders, but also sharing so you know the actual number that you can report in history purposes and what your spend was at the hotel. When it comes to enhancing the art of the deal for hoteliers and buyers alike, I just want to take a few minutes to discuss the dynamics and how we can all work together as a unit to create a cohesiveness in making our goals for both stakeholders, hoteliers alike, and suppliers alike. Very seldom do we see meeting planners have career paths that go into hotel sales and vice versa. There's not very many hoteliers who can say they've walked the shoes of being a corporate or association meeting planner. My point here is that it's important to understand the dynamics for both sides. We want to help bridge that gap for better communication and better outcomes. By enhanced communications with our partners, we can strategically have an RFP process where the hotel can evaluate those revenue contributions and really represent your meeting to a whole to their leadership and give you a great proposal on the front end. Creating metrics that we can define and measure success. Hoteliers providing the information that's important for the planners to be able to provide those metrics to their stakeholders. The mutual process to track data again and create those meeting value reports that they can share twofold after the counter signature and after actualization of the meeting. Planners, just think about this. How many times would you go back to the same hotel if you felt that you were provided all this up front? If you felt valued, if you felt the service model from the time you talked to the hotel from the first conversation? Think about the ability to rebook over and over if you could as a supplier with a great relationship and providing all of this upfront. Again, the overreaching goal for both planners and hoteliers alike, managing our meeting stakeholders. The expectation is high and it is our highest priority. We need to understand what their expectations are and again, how we can present that data in a measurable format that everybody understands and feels valued. Here is a simple formula for buyers and sellers alike to succeed. Now, when we're talking about planners, again, strategic meeting management is going to deliver the measurable value to your stakeholders. Hoteliers, your hotel revenue management team, and that is one of your largest stakeholders. How can you maximize revenues and profitability, and how can you present the meeting to on behalf of the hotel in order to respond with the best rates available and still keep in mind where you need to be with your hotel revenue management team. The 4 points that planners and hoteliers can address alike, and again, to meet strategic meeting management and hotel revenue management. Assess those total revenues on each side. What is the account value? What are the variables over your meeting date? Evaluate that on both for the planners and hoteliers alike. Emphasize the overall goals and objectives and determine where your flex points are, where we can really drive value, or maybe on the side of where the hotel can drive this conversation and really explain to the planners where they can gain some value. Again, success requires those open and honest communication and conversations at all stages of the negotiation. And it's okay on either side to determine a walk away position. You know, we both have a minimum expectation to achieve, and if that can't be met, it's okay. It would be time to move on. It's just a marketplace reality. There's no hard feelings, but better that you know that up front than after doing, data and analysis and knowing up front that this may not be the best fit. I'm sure planners, we can all come up with some scenarios in which we could save some time in knowing locations just aren't the best fit for our meeting and that we can move on maybe to our plan B. I'd like to talk about 6 steps to value-based negotiations. Today, value-based negotiations require a highly collaborative process and a careful evaluation by total meeting value by meeting, specifically by utilizing that strategic RF and accessing your leverage for each meeting, evaluating all revenue contributions by category, creating that custom hotel contract we talked about and modifying that as you see fit for each meeting. Focus on those negotiation added meeting values, cost savings, and the contract risk reductions. Track the meetings. Strategic meeting management starts here. Tracking those meetings by spend, category. You can track those individually by meeting, individually by hotel, or by chain. Again, if you have this data is what can arm you for future negotiations with a hotel or with a specific chain. By being prepared with that information, you have the power to negotiate upfront with those hotels. From your countersigned contract, again, create that cost savings risk reduction report, and then visit that again after the meeting has taken place. Strategic meeting management has placed a premium on measuring meeting value. Regardless of where we're at, with shifts in our marketplace, one thing still rings true. When planners carefully evaluate each meeting, they understand their leverage and their flexibility and have a negotiation plan. You're going to add more value to your meeting's bottom line with an emphasis on risk reduction and be able to share that with your stakeholders. I appreciate all of your time today. Joining me, and then also if you have reference to the handouts on this webinar, there are 2 pieces of information: best practices and a detailed information, and then also a top 10 tips for contracting. These are pieces you can get as handouts, and I believe they will be shared online as well post the webinar. I'll turn it over to Barbara now for some wrap-up items and following with some Q&A.
Nice job. Thank you so much. I did have many, many questions coming in during the presentation, so we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. And
Perfect.
then, Katie, maybe I can volunteer you to follow up afterwards to the ones we don't get to.
Absolutely, not a problem. I'd be happy to answer those one-on-one or have that constructive conversation if we
Great.
need to one-on-one.
Great. So I will say the majority of the questions had to do with getting spend information from hotels. What
Okay,
is the best way to go about getting, the ancillary spend information, getting hotels to give you attendees spend for restaurants, bars, spa, etc.?
perfect. Great question, Barbara, and great question for the panelists that ask those questions. So there's a few different ways we have seen this in the past, and it probably depends really on the type of property you're going to and the availability maybe of technology they have available to you. So I'll answer this in a few different ways that you can get that ancillary spend. First, if you're going to an all-inclusive property where you are pretty much covering all those basic costs for the client, hotel and food and beverages included, we've seen customers have specific colored wristband or something that designates them as a different attendee than a transient attendee at a hotel. This keys off those retail shops. This keys off when making that reservation for the spa or the golf. If they designate and they see that wristband, or they talk about when they make that reservation that they are part of this meeting, we talk to the planners about talking to your attendees and making sure that they tell the person when they are talking to them to make a reservation that, hey, I'm part of this group, or B, making sure you have that wristband on at all times, so that keys off the person actually making that transaction to include that ancillary spend. 2, we encourage actually the suppliers to offer a discount code. Now, this may not be a huge discount overall, overreaching for the hotelier, and that's okay. But what you're showing the planner is that you're encouraging their attendees to use those outlets. So if they have let's say it is discount code AB20, it's the discount code that you provide when you buy something in the retail shop. I have discount code, I'm part of AB20. Great, then you're providing that when you buy drinks at the bar. And overall, this is being, again, something that they can put in their system where they can track that ancillary spend at the hotel based upon pulling up information from all of their outlets where that code was provided. The other one that's pretty easy to track, and sometimes it has to be an overall percentage, would be that if you're a larger group at a hotel, you can ask the hotel, can you provide the data? We've taken up 3/4 of your hotel. Can you give us data on what was the spend in your restaurants from day A to day B? And you can say, okay, based upon knowing that our group was 3/4 of the hotel full, providing the hotel 3/4 of the rooms full, you can make a guess on that if there's really no technology provided. There's no technology provided to provide with ancillary spend, then you can say, okay, this restaurant reported $100,000 in revenue that night. Well, we could fully guess that if 5% of the hotel was filled with our fees, let's make an estimate that 75 revenue was from our group. So there's a lot of different ways to report that. Again, talking with your hotelier suppliers and say, what have groups done in the past? Tell me how we can talk about ancillary spend and how we can capture that data, because I'd like to use that going forward to really leverage my meetings and report that in the beginning. I think they're all going to be on board to be good partners with you and give you some creative ways to track that.
Great, great. This is from Eric, who is
Okay.
not a fan of addendums. He said, I usually try and get all addendum language incorporated within the actual hotel agreement.
Agreed.
How easy is that to do? How hard? How does it break down as far as how often you can make
How
that
often?
happen? Yeah.
Absolutely. So Eric, what I that is wholeheartedly, I am not a big fan of working with a contract and a piece of the contract that makes you feel like it's, you know, your addendum is like the extra added piece to that. Like you're like you don't matter within the contract. That's kind of how an addendum sometimes can. It is the hotel that says, hey, we can't include your information in the whole contract. What I encourage you to do is have that open conversation with the hotels that are on your short list. Tell them when you're down to those 2 to 3 hotels, hey, we do use a custom contract for our process. Will that be an issue for you? Have set that expectation up front. That way, you know when evaluating option A, option B, or option C, which ones are willing to be a partner who can work with you. I'd go as far as saying to include some of those clauses and language and let them review that. Show them what you're looking for in some of those instances and see what they're willing to work with. I always encourage my customers when we're talking about things to have an option A and an option B, and in current times an option C. Sometimes option A looks the best on paper. It looks the best when it comes to overall value. But when it comes to that point where we're really getting down to that nitty gritty and discussing, how is this contract going to look? Are they asking us to add, like you said, an addendum and not include this whole document? If Hotel B is showing that they're wanting to be a good partner and incorporate either their contract and our contract together, or they're willing to accept our custom contract and just make the changes to our custom contract and just redline and add verbiage when necessary or delete verbiage when necessary and make that one whole document. Sometimes that's more of a peace of mind as a planner too, and working from one document. So I would say always have that as a piece of the conversation with the point where you start a short list.
Okay. Totally switching topics to rates from
Okay.
Ron. As a planner, I always have challenges getting hotels to tell me the comparative rack rates, especially on meeting space. So comparisons can be made between the rack and negotiated rates.
Mhm.
Hoteliers are often reluctant to do that, but it's crucial info. What do you recommend?
So I would say a couple things here. I would say it's crucial info in knowing maybe a starting point and an end point. However, when I'm showing my stakeholders and my clients' stakeholders information, I don't include rack information in that cost savings analysis. Where I show cost savings is point A of where rate was quoted to us as a group and where point B we ended up on the contract, what the difference in that was. That's really the value that I try to demonstrate, because that is comparing one thing to another. Comparing rack rates can sometimes be an outlier, for lack of better words, because there's so much going on in a hotel at one time, much going on as it affects rates, seasonality, other events taking place. I can tell you a great example of this, Ron, would be, what I was approaching a hotel and talking about a large annual conference, and this group was very rated. We had talked about that in the beginning stages of the RFP, saying they have a specific budget they have to meet, and gave this customer wanted to give the amount in which they were not willing to go over. the hotelier picked up the phone and said, this is a great talking piece because I have the rooms available to you, but something that can skew this right now is an event taking place in the city that affects the very last day of your conference. And that was a talking piece that started out talking about how the rate may be skewed, but actually ended up, we talked about that more about how what events were taking place around that besides rate, besides skewing the rate where it was actually a marathon. So a marathon was taking place on a Sunday, and that would affect the rate for the customer, obviously, when it comes to, around the weekend time, but the customer's check-in date was Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So that how that was going to overall skew things and possibly, again, be higher rates. So when you talk about rack rates, there's so many outliers that affect that. I would really concentrate on the starting point of your negotiation of where the hotel quoted a rate to where you ended, where you contracted, and reporting that information versus providing information on rack rates. Now, I do feel that it's important once you have a countersigned contract to have some type of protocol in place where you're going to be monitoring or every so often looking at the rates that the hotel is offering outside of that group rate over the same meeting dates, and making sure you also have a clause in your contract that addresses that so that your rate integrity stays whole. Specifically, when you have groups that are having individuals make reservations and they go around the process, we all know how that can affect our pickup and affect everything with the group, and again affect how you're represented to those customers. So again, answering this twofold, really, I'd say let's not worry and make the primary concern the rack rate. I would say consider it being the rate you started with, the rate you ended with, and monitoring that you're still getting rate integrity over the hotel over the dates you have contracted for. And if not, have that clause in your contract where the hotel is being held responsible and liable if for some reason they would drop those rates or rates would change for some variable reason over your meeting dates.
Okay, thank you. Uh, Everybody's favorite topic, hotel resort fees. It seems hotels are getting crazy with exorbitant resort fees. What are
Mhm.
strategies for reducing the fee? Most times my attendees are kept so busy with program activities, they don't have the opportunity to use the services even covered by the resort fees. And I'm sure most of us can relate to that. Any ideas?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sure. So I would say, again, take this on a case by case basis. When it comes to resort fees, look at what's really all included in that fee. Like you said, they may not be able to enjoy the leisures and some of those amenities that are included in that resort fee. But if there are specific items, and I'm seeing this more and more, that resort fees are including, obviously, one of those costs is internet costs now, or some hotels are saying that resort fee includes a daily couple bottles of water in the room. Let's calculate what that cost
Mhm.
would be incrementally if we were to provide those services to the client as a whole. Now, we know everybody's going to be using internet, for example, and everybody would, if you have a couple bottles of water or something in your room, you're going to take advantage of that. So, because, buying the $5 or $7 or who knows, bottle of water at some of those resorts could really cut into the pocketbook once you buy those one by one. But I guess I would say, there is a case by case basis where you can negotiate down and say, you know what, our clients will not be able to use points A, B, and C. So instead of resort fee at $30, let's talk about reducing it down to half of that. Would you be willing to reduce the resort fee down to $15? Because my attendees are only really going to be provide the time that they're available, use half of those services or half of those items that are included there. Or, if they are not willing to drop the resort fee, if that's something that's, a stronghold with that property, and they say, you know what, we just really, we can never negotiate out a resort fee. Okay, well, let's talk about it in the fact that where can I see other cost savings for my attendee? Can you provide a $10 off the room rate if you're going to have a full resort fee? $10 from our starting point to our end point. If the actual company is paying and it's overall master build, okay, well, if you're not willing to drop the cost, you're not willing to drop the cost and resort fee, where can we see some savings on hindsight? Can we increase our rebate on the master bill? Was it in the starting point of our conversation, was it a 5%? Now can we offer a 7% to offset those costs? think of other ways to get creative around not putting yourself into the box that, gosh, you're just not willing to reduce the resort fee, but possibly depending on how you're paying for the conference. If it's an individual attendee cost, yes, let's get back to an individual attendee cost and how that can be provided. But if it's an overall cost for the organization paying for it, where can I get some savings elsewhere if the hotel is not willing to negotiate on behalf of that resort fee?
Okay. From Anita. Hi, Anita. Please give an example of a situation where you shared with some other meeting before or after various costs,
Oh, to share in the shared costs?
right?
Okay, perfect. So the one example I'll give of this, we were all the way to the point of contracting with a hotel, a customer and we talked about laying out the meeting space, getting down to the nitty gritty and going line by line on the items of, this is the beginning of the meeting, this is the end of the meeting. And we noticed that our load in time had changed by an hour or two. This was something where it keyed us off to talk to the hotel sales manager and say, okay, when we started this process and talking, our load in time was 1 p.m. and now it's at 3. What's happened between point A and point B in our conversation? That sparked the hotel sales manager to say to us, well, we've had a hotel group contract over those dates, so I needed to move that time back. Oh, okay, great. Well, that's changed for your hotel. I'm glad you've been able to put that business on the books. Can you tell me what their setup looks like? Because if I can possibly save a little bit of time and get back to a closer start time for my conference to be loaded in, because keep in mind, if you're using, I guess I'll take a step back. If you're both using the in-house provider, whoever that may be, this makes the conversation much easier. Now, it may not make them happy because they're losing a little bit of revenue on each side of that conference, but you're making the process much easier. Now, sometimes it's hard to actually connect the planner A and planner B together. This is where I would see the challenge in the conversation was that planner A was not able to connect with us and our planner, but we were able to connect the hotel sales managers, and the hotel sales manager was speaking on our behalf of saying, this is what we'd be willing to do. What would you be willing to do? And at that point in time, I don't know any hotelier who wants to lose a second piece of business just because of AV costs alone and setup times. So at that point, we trusted that they were our advocate and they were going to do the best they could to get us to where we need to be meeting halfway with the other group. It's not an easy process. I will say that it can be lengthy, but knowing that, again, you're having those conversations, you're being in communication constantly with your suppliers, and you're being upfront saying, I am not going to be able to work with this setup time, or I am not going to be able to execute with my setup if this is the case given. That was able to spark the conversation to bring it back to the other group. That was able to spark the conversation to a shared cost, and just being able to be open from point A of starting the conversation to point B of contracting, just making sure we're talking to the hotel about, they may not be able to tell you what groups are in-house clearly because there's legalities around that. For obvious reasons, but just asking the question. I mean, the worst they can tell you is we can't share that information with you. But if you ask the question, 9 times out of 10, you'd be surprised at the answer around that, and just basically asking information on setup. And is it similar to ours? Are they using the same general session? If I were to flex on my general session, a different setup, or, what are they doing for staging? Just asking those questions, you'd be surprised at how many hoteliers would be able to want to have that conversation with you and provide you that information. And that's a huge cost savings.
That's actually a great idea for a resource, is a list of like, dozens of potential questions you
Mm-hmm.
could ask just to
Absolutely.
get people thinking.
Yeah.
I do have many questions about the current crisis, and
Mm-hmm.
we've decided for this particular event that really we could have done the entire event about that, to
Sure.
stick to
Sure.
the basics. And I just want to let people know that in your handouts, there's a link
Mm-hmm.
to Prevue's resources where we've interviewed several industry lawyers on everything from
Mm-hmm.
cancellation to force majeure. I encourage
Mm-hmm.
everyone to take a look at that link. we are getting to the end of the hour. I hope, Katie, we can have you back and maybe we'll focus on, solely on that. But
Sure,
this has been
sure,
extremely
absolutely.
helpful. I also did get several compliments in the notes, which I'll share with you. But I do
Oh,
hope it
thank
was
you.
helpful to all. You did a terrific job. I would like to announce Karen Lazowski as the winner of the $100 gift card, and we'll be reaching out to you right after the webinar. So I'm signing off for now. This is Barbara Scafidio for Prevue Magazine. Thank you so much, Katie Muck from Meeting
You are
Sites
welcome.
Reviewers, and hope you're all doing well. Stay safe, and we will be seeing you again at a future webinar. Have a good
Perfect.
afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. I appreciate it. Everyone stay well, and we'll make it through this time and come out stronger on the other side. Take care.
Thanks again.